This is Jessa, if you're just listening, hosting this week. And I'm so excited to host because our guest is Lucy Courchaine. You may know her as the host of the Equestrian Mama podcast that we have on the Ride IQ app and also on all public podcast platforms. You may know her on Instagram because she has a big Instagram following. Um, is it Lucy in the Sky with Sapphires? Is that the
Yeah,
handle?
that's right.
And you may know her just as an incredible rider and trainer. She's a Grand Prix rider and trainer. She's also the mom to two beautiful girls, one of whom is only 5 weeks old. So we're incredibly lucky to be with Lucy today. And we're keeping things in this realm of Equestrian Mama. We're talking riding and motherhood and kind of anything that falls under that umbrella is game for tonight. Something that Lucy and I talked about ahead of time is just kind of comparing the two children that she's had, both pregnancy, birth, and after birth, because they were totally different experiences. And she's learned so much through having two totally different experiences. So we'll talk about those different phases of motherhood and how they relate to riding and just gain some insight from Lucy because she's a wealth of knowledge. So, Lucy, thank you so much for taking time to get into this really important and not talked about enough topic.
Thank you, Jessa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first professional project back after baby Zelda, so it couldn't be more exciting for me to be kind of talking about this again and be back in the studio, so to speak. So, thank you for having me. And this is of course a topic very near and dear to my heart, and I'm just excited to talk about it.
I'm excited too. And I'm so glad that you accepted this invite. When I reached out, I was like, it definitely doesn't have to be anytime soon because I know Zelda's only 5 weeks. And you're like, let's do it this week. So I'm very grateful. And I know there's a chance and maybe even a high likelihood that we'll get to meet Zelda tonight
Yeah, I
because
think
she'll be
so.
eating sometime soon. So she'll definitely be a welcome guest. But
Awesome.
tell us, maybe one thing I guess to start is we will not be able to get in. There's so much that we could dive into on all of these different topics, but the beauty of it is you have the Equestrian Mama podcast, and I think you're 15 or 18 episodes into that already, and they're incredible, deep, beautiful conversations with guests on so many of these topics. So if you are listening and these topics are kind of resonating with you, go to the Equestrian Mama podcast because there's so much goodness there already and so much more that Lucy's planning. So this is not it for what you can get from Lucy. But Lucy, will you start by telling us about Alice and Zelda, um, and just kind of how your riding life as well, and then we'll go into those three different phases.
Yeah, for sure. So, if you don't already listen to the podcast or you don't follow me on social and you don't know all the things that I share so openly about my life as an equestrian mom, I have two children. My first daughter is just turned 3, so almost exactly 3 years apart. I like to say that I have a fall foaling season because both of my babies were both unplanned and they almost happened at the exact same time. But they're 3 years apart. I just had Zelda, my second baby, 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks ago yesterday. So she's brand new, and I am really loving the second time around, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. You're just kind of so much smarter and older and wiser in so many ways, but I'm still going through that. And so I'll share kind of my experience with that. But my regular job, I guess, is I'm a dressage trainer in North Salem in the Westchester, New York area, servicing New York and Connecticut. And I run a boutique dressage barn between 10 and 15 client horses at a time. And I also train and project a couple of young. I like to do small. I'm very small a person, so I do small but fancy, as I call it, ponies and petite warm bloods for petite women, amateurs, mostly specifically for amateur riders, and do a little bit of sales and kind of everything. I like to do a little bit of everything in the horse world, and that's what brought me to be passionate about sharing on this topic. Is that when I first got pregnant with Alice, my first baby, as a professional who uses my body every day as my job, as my tool for my job, I was freaked out. I was terrified. I could not understand how I was going to combine my lives and how I was going to ride and if I was going to ride. And I went straight to Google and there was not very much available, nothing helpful, mostly only doomsday, terrible, like don't do anything, or you're a horrible person, horrible mom. And so I fumbled my way through my first pregnancy and really messed up my first postpartum, but I learned from it. And now through my second pregnancy and now in my second postpartum period season is so much better and so much different that I became really motivated, passionate, driven to share this information because so I'm uh, obviously not the first person to do this, but it does seem like I'm one of the first people to share in this way and be so open and available with information that I couldn't find that I know people need, including guidance on how you can ride if that works for you and your body, and how you can be a professional horse trainer, or you can just have horses in your life still. You don't have to be a professional. You can be an amateur. You can have them as a hobby. You can have them in your backyard. You can have them just in your neighbor's backyard that you wave at once in a while. Like it doesn't have to be full time, but there's such a range of being in contact with horses and being a mom, being a woman who was trying to do both, that I really felt like there was a need. So I'm trying my best to be the change, be fill the need with this information and just in sharing my version. Obviously it's one version, but I also think the more I share, the more other people will share and the more versions we can hear and the more we can help each other through. And that's what I would really like to cultivate in the future now and ongoing, is that the more we all talk about our versions, the more we can help each other be in an equestrian mom community that can't possibly be a bad thing.
Totally. I am so inspired by you in so many ways,
Oh,
and
thank you.
this this like knack that you have for building community is really special to watch and, I mean, in a lot of cases listen to, since a lot of it comes through Equestrian Mama. But it's like one part sharing insights, which you do have incredible insights because your stories are relatable and you cover kind of a spectrum because you've had really different experiences between the two girls.
Right.
But also in doing so, like making people feel less lonely and more empowered to take on whatever version of equestrian motherhood is right for them and like fits their life. Um,
I love that. I'm so happy that's what's being received because that's exactly what I want to do.
yeah. Um, when I was outlining this conversation, I kept trying to figure out where to fit this next question in because it's kind of a big one, but I was like, let's just put it at the top because then it can be a bit of a foundation for the rest of what we talk about. One thing that, as I look through questions of moms or people who are considering being moms and trying to figure out how to ride, everyone is talking about how to balance riding and motherhood or riding and pregnancy. And each time I see that, I'm like, what does balance really mean? And is balance possible? Is balance the goal? So, as you have gone through the experience of, I mean, your first pregnancy, which like was a surprise and made you nervous about how what that means for your career and this thing that you love so much, to now, how has your version or how has your understanding of success changed, or your understanding of balance, if that's what you're aiming for, changed? Like where does it stand today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's the very short answer is it's ongoing, because it's really something that I don't know that people even can. I think it might be a little bit of an elusive goal. I think
Mhm.
balance, to me, balance means like evenness. I mean, when I talk about balance in my dressage horses, we talk about evenness and squareness and loading the both legs, both sides of the horse, both sides of the rider evenly. And when you're looking at balancing your life as a mom, it's never even. At least for me, nothing has ever been even. It's always uneven. It's always imperfect. It's always floating and changing. And that's really what I have learned, because I'm a very type A dressage trainer for a reason. I like everything to always be like exact and have an answer and line up perfectly and be clear and one way. And then I stick to that way, and I'm nothing if not consistent, and can just like keep hammering away the same process. But as a mom, I've learned that doesn't work anymore. Certainly because my children are still small. I'm still very much learning myself, but am learning that it's complex and constantly moving, changing. But that my second time around, and now I would say I feel like I have a lot more, I've given myself a lot more grace for that. I actually named Zelda's middle name is Grace, as a constant reminder to myself what this second child has taught me. And through my second pregnancy, that became so clear that I was like, there's no other middle name for her. It's that, because it's like I finally learned that. I finally, like, taken me 35 years to learn grace for myself, when I think I give it to my horses and my clients and probably some members of my family, but not myself ever. And now I'm like, you know what? It's fine. It's fine if nothing is exact perfect, and it's okay. And you will live, and the horses will live, your business will live, whatever it is that I was always worried about not being perfect. This two children, it's taken me two pregnancies, two children, to learn that you can actually, like, give yourself a little grace to get through the changes and the differences, and then finding balance in that, because it's it's constant and hard. And there's constant hard, and then like good and easy and tough, and things that you love, things that you hate. Everything is always kind of fluctuating, but I think I'm finally in a place where I'm like, it's okay, it's going to be okay. In one way or the other.
That's so beautiful. I didn't know that about her middle name. But it makes perfect sense given your ambitions as a mom, as a trainer, as a rider, that that is kind of an overarching theme that you're embracing in this stage. Um,
Thanks. Yeah,
let's
it felt like the right thing, as a
yeah.
reminder to myself, and just to like always know her as like that is kind of what she gave to me before she was even born. So she's gonna get that name to always remember that.
Oh, that is so cool. Let's talk about pregnancy. And one of the questions that comes up a lot, and sometimes like sheepishly, because people are,
Yeah.
nervous to talk about it, is riding while pregnant. Um, Tell us how you approached riding while pregnant with Zelda and kind of what your thought process was around that. Um, let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So I get, this is like easily the most common question that I get it through my socials as well, and just in regular life. And I always preface with the disclaimer that obviously I'm not a medical professional and I can't give medical advice. But I do highly recommend people listen to our second episode of the podcast, because we talked to an OBGYN who really, she and I discuss at length like some of the medical indications with riding while pregnant. However, I do consider myself fairly knowledgeable on it, having done it twice through two very healthy, thankfully, perfectly normal, shall we say, baby girls. Um, and I started with Alice, I started this research very in depth, and feel comfortable sharing what I did and why I did it. But I know that everybody is different, every woman is different, and most importantly, every risk tolerance is different. I think that's the discussion I have the most with people, more than their medical implications, which of course are important. And there is no question that some people cannot ride or should not ride for medical reasons, for a wide variety that you would discuss with your OB or your midwife or whoever's advising you in your medical stages of pregnancy, and your prenatal care. But if like me, the pregnancy is normal and you are already healthy and fit and you have been riding, I considered it very much like any other workout, any other sport that people might do that then they would not be changing when they're pregnant because their body is used to doing that. And for me as a professional, I was riding both pregnancies. I got pregnant while I was riding between 8 and 10 horses a day. It's my job all day, every day, and I'm very, very comfortable in the saddle. I still made big changes, which I will definitely talk about in a second. But in both pregnancies, rode. I rode with Alice to 32 weeks, like really riding, showing, and 30 to 35 weeks, really just like trail riding. And then with Zelda, contrary to what I thought, I actually rode really at full strength to about 36 weeks, which was real. I was even bigger. Doesn't really make sense to me how that worked out, but it did. Um, and didn't have I had no reason not to physically, and I was very fortunate with that. I also worked really hard to take care of my body. I do Pilates normally as a dressage rider. I work really hard on my nutrition, pelvic floor therapy, both during both pregnancies and after, and that allowed me to be pretty successful, pretty comfortable. And then that's the medical side, and then the risk tolerance side is that I felt very comfortable with myself and my skills and the horses that I chose to ride. So I really didn't. I made some big changes, and my first major rule that I tell everyone is like I didn't ride any new horses. I didn't take on anything that I didn't know already horse wise. And of course, all horses are unpredictable. Anything can happen. But when I looked at the risk and I looked at my skills and my body and the horses I chose to ride, all of which were very kind, generous, amateur, well-trained horses trained by myself that I knew really well. They the risk to me was really similar to like driving your car on the highway, where yes, anything can happen, but anything can happen when you're pregnant no matter what you're doing. So I was more comfortable continuing my riding for both my for many reasons, mostly for my mental health, also for my business. I am self-employed and train horses for a living, so I couldn't just say, you know what, I'm not going to. No one pressured me to ride, but at the end of the day, I get paid when I ride. So I really had to balance that against it, and I'm not independently wealthy. I couldn't be in a position to say, I'll just choose not to because I don't have to. It was a balance of all these things, and for me, that led to riding throughout the whole pregnancy. So now I feel pretty comfortable talking about it, and having had two babies that, the only side effect I would say is that they both really need to be bounced hard to go to sleep. But I think that's from being sitting trot posting trot for so long through the pregnancy. And they can tolerate quite a bit of motion when they're asleep. They're like, you can bounce them really high in the air and they are like, we're sleeping through this.
That is too cute.
So both of them consistently do that. But otherwise, I know it's super individual, and I'm always happy to talk to people about it. I actually love talking about it. I get a lot of shit on social media for it anytime I post videos of it, but I just block and delete. That's my that's my motto with that.
Yeah. I mean, so much of motherhood is owning your intuition because
Yeah,
there are a million different ways to approach this, and what's right for you, like you said, is not right for everyone, but you'll drive yourself crazy if all of those voices affect you. Just like knowing what you can know and doing what's best for you and your children, and like trusting that intuition is such a necessary skill, I feel like, for motherhood, just to
totally.
um, be able to do it and stay sane and mentally healthy. And you mentioned that episode with Dr. Kathleen Bertuna, the second episode of Equestrian Mama. I loved your guys' conversation, and she's a rider as well, and she was just so candid about, I was interested to see how that conversation would go because it's so, you know, it's would be fair for her to really like dance around those topics, and she totally did not dance around them. She
Yeah.
answered everything really clearly and gave the information really directly, and I feel like it did kind of
Right.
give permission to approach riding however works for you. And if you're not watching, sweet baby Zelda's here with us now. She
Baby
woke
coming
up.
in. This is real motherhood right here.
I
I'm
know.
gonna have to like feed her. I'm just gonna put my
Lu
camera up.
Lucy and I had a phone call yesterday to prep for this, and I have a 4-month-old, and Lucy was so gracious with me because the whole thing was like trying to feed him basically and keep him quiet enough for the conversation. But it totally is. I mean, it's
Real.
only appropriate that
Yeah.
you're feeding her during the
And
conversation.
you might hear, hopefully, not too disruptive, but she's like a very loud gulping. She chugs her milk quite a bit. So
Well,
sometimes
that's
she has
I
a
mean,
little
good for her at only
bell.
5 weeks. That's a great sign.
I
So,
know she's like my doctor's like, I can't believe she's a monster baby. She must eat really well. I'm like, she does. I'm very
yeah.
lucky with that. She's got
That's
these
great.
strong Midwestern horse girl genes in her. She's like
Oh,
like
that's
a
amazing.
strong girl.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Um,
that conversation was amazing, and
mhm.
certainly was like that's the kind of content we really want to be putting out that is candid, informative, really helps people see what is possible and not just this like negative you shouldn't. Of course, there's plenty of voices that say you shouldn't, right? Like I think more people hear that. I still heard that throughout both pregnancies from even family
Yeah.
who not, thankfully I have a very supportive husband who knew that trying to stop me from riding would be a difficult road.
Yeah.
But he, supported me and I couldn't do it without the support that I did have. I was not going to try to be one against the world in that way, but the truth is there is support for it because it is okay. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to be that quiet voice right now of that side of things because plenty of women have done this. Plenty of women have ridden horses. And I think on one of my reels that went pretty viral that people were saying all kinds of their opinions on. I thought one woman commented and said, "You should have seen us riding in the 70s while pregnant." And I was like, "Yeah, probably without a helmet and smoking and drinking all
Yeah.
at the same time, It's like at least we're doing it like safe. We're not drunk while we're riding
Right,
also.
yeah.
Like, go on, there is some progress here." So, it's all relative, it's all individual, but it can be done. And if it works out, I think for me, I would do it again. If I had 100 more babies, I'd do it 100
Yeah.
times because it's what kept me sane, truly,
Mhm.
and fit and healthy, ready for labor, ready for the battle that is motherhood all the time on your body and just choices. And like you said, trusting your intuition. I really think, there were days that I didn't ride at full capacity. There were choices I didn't make. There were horses I didn't hack out because I didn't feel like that was the safest choice. I was quite cognizant of the risk and careful to mediate it as little as possible. So I didn't ride the same I rode when I was not pregnant, but I did show my horses and I competed, did a couple of Grand Prix in my first pregnancy, showed my young horse in my second pregnancy. And like those were huge things to me that I didn't want to miss out on. And I didn't feel I had to just because I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Kind of spoiler alert, I didn't have to. It all went fine.
Yeah. Totally. In your comparing your first pregnancy to your second pregnancy, what are the things that you changed? I mean, you mentioned being super cognizant of nutrition, physical health.
Yeah.
It sounds like your riding was somewhat similar between the two, but what are the things that you kind of chose to do differently with Zelda just because you knew more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm not sure that I changed too much in pregnancy with Zelda because once I found out I was pregnant with Alice, I did kind of go like 1,000% into the like how much can I educate myself and do the best I can, and did things like I gave up caffeine right away, which was super hard. And these are all just my personal choices and what I wanted to do to try to make myself feel good about, like with the balance that we talked about. I tried to be extremely cognizant of taking care of my body so that I could feel good to ride, so I felt like it was a little bit of a trade-off if that I was super, super healthy and followed all of the other rules and was really careful with my pregnancy and my health and checked it, as as anyone who's been pregnant knows, like you're not doing this on your own. You go to a bazillion prenatal visits. I had lots of checks to keep track of that I was fit to do this and making the right choices, shall we say. And so with Zelda, I just tried to do the same thing. This is my brain, and I know it's something I'll work on the rest of my life, but I'm trying really hard to be equal with both of them so far, in that if I did something for Alice, I'm going to do it for Zelda. I'm trying hard to fight the like second child syndrome of that she's not going to get that. A lot of people say, oh, you're second, maybe you'll do you won't give up that stuff and you won't care. It won't be, and you so lax. And then also in the same breath, people will say, oh, and your second won't be as good. She won't be as perfect. There's no way you'll get
Right.
it. And I'm like, maybe if you took as much care as you did on the first one. So that's simply my thought process, obviously very unique and very individual. And a lot of it, you can't control the outcome. But I'm trying to be careful. For me, it makes me feel better to be like, okay, I gave up caffeine with Alice. I gave it up pregnant with Zelda.
Yeah.
And I was careful in the riding, didn't do certain things where riding with Alice. I didn't take any of those risks differently with Zelda. And I think for me, both pregnancies, nutrition wise, I guess one big thing I learned in between was hydration, electrolyte support for myself. That was a major change. I didn't take enough electrolytes with Alice, and I think that didn't help me in a lot of my postpartum and some of the like dehydration and things I fought toward in the third trimester. But with Zelda, I was very cognizant and then diligent about taking electrolytes every day, maintaining like being super hydrated. Both both pregnancies, I just basically followed my cravings, which could range a lot. But I did do a lot of research that like if you are fit and healthy, like most of us horse women are really in tune with our bodies. You have to be a good rider. I think you can't be just like, I'm not sure. I don't know what I need or want. Like, no, you do, because you know what the horses need and want. You just have to quiet everything else enough to listen. And once I did that, she's like it's being her very loudest right now.
It is so cute.
But um, oh no, the little coughing is gonna start. um, Once I really tried to tune into my body and listen to my cravings, I realized each trimester, both pregnancies, your body tells you kind of what you need. First trimester, I wanted like basically fried chicken, like anything that would like keep my stomach like quiet and like you know not. I was super had super bad morning sickness with both girls, and so I just kind of ate whatever I could keep down. Second trimester, both of them, I wanted like fruits and veggies and like salads and like really healthy stuff. And then I would randomly want like McDonald's, and I would go
Yeah.
and get it, and then and like fish. I wanted only like fish oils. I had like salmon and tuna, like canned tuna, like both pregnancies. That I pretty much only had that. I didn't want both girls. I didn't want any red meat. I just like couldn't look at it, and I all ate everything before being pregnant. But I gave that up. And then third trimester, I was just like, I want like cake and cookies and fat. Like just pack the fat on them. And they're both humongous. I mean, Zelda was 9 pounds when she was born. So crazy, but apparently following that grew them big and strong. And
Yeah.
I felt good about that when I looked at like, okay, I'm still riding and I'm still choosing some of these things for me, but I'm really trying to be very cognizant of the pregnancy as like, I'm not just being selfish. I am making the best like version of myself that I can to carry this child all the way that I as far as I can and as healthy as I can.
Yeah.
And that was just what worked for me.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned electrolytes. It was either a phone call that you and I had or on one of your episodes. It's all a blur between the 2,
Yeah.
but you mentioned that, and because of that, it's like there are not a whole lot of things that I religiously have as part of my routine, but
Yeah.
every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is put a scoop of electrolytes in my water, and
Oh
that's
my
been
gosh, that's
since you
awesome.
said that. Because you mentioned, like, you just feel so different when you have
Uh-huh.
your electrolytes versus when you don't.
I really
Um,
do.
Is there a brand that you prefer?
Um, well, TBD on that because I'm really trying to like. I don't know. There's not one that I prefer because I don't believe there's a good enough one out there. So
Okay.
stay tuned on that. There
Yeah.
might be a better one coming.
I love how your brain works. That's a great
That's like
teaser.
a pipe dream for me. Just, no one steal that idea from me, please, that's listening. But
They
I do
won't.
think
That's
there's a need. I think there's a lot of good ones, but there's not a good enough one. So yeah, I use what I right now. I think I vacillate between one that's called Sea Sport, SEA, because it's sea from the Dead Sea salt,
mhm.
um, or from the Great. I can't remember one of the lakes that has salt in it. Maybe Great Salt Lake in Utah, but it's like a sport salt electrolytes, and then liquid IV. I love.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
too much sugar. I mean, it's a lot of sugar. That's the
Yeah.
problem for me.
Yeah.
But it's very good, very tasty.
Totally.
Oh my gosh,
Okay,
I've
good
got
to
my
know.
eyeball picking up all of her sounds, but there's sounds coming out of both ends right
Oh,
now.
I love that. Um, Anybody who has a baby knows they are so little and the toots are like
I know.
those of a truck driver. It's like so funny.
I know.
One of my
Often I'm
favorite
like,
things.
are you kidding me? Is that still going? And they'll just like stare you dead in the eye and be so serious and be like, no,
Yeah,
nothing's happening. You're like, but a lot is happening actually.
totally. That's really cute. I missed it, but I bet it did get picked up. Um, okay, so you were riding a lot during your pregnancies, which was part of how you were able to stay really fit. For amateurs who have maybe one horse or they're not riding as much or not riding at all, are there any like do you have exercise advice for them that will
Yes.
serve them in birth and postpartum to get them back in the saddle more easily?
Yes. So a big difference that I did, actually the only difference I made in my workouts, because I love to work out on the side. Not crazy. I'm not like a CrossFit person. I like small, bite-sized, manageable workouts that I can cross train with my riding. So Pilates has always been that for me. I love Pilates. I'm um, a student slash adopted child of Betsy Steiner's, and she's the mother of Equilates and Pilates for riders. So she taught me the value of that, and it's always stayed with me. But when Pilates is a lot of stuff on your back, and at a certain point, you can't do that when you're pregnant. I'm small, and my babies were always huge. So basically, second trimester, I couldn't do any mat stuff, Pilates mat stuff. So first pregnancy, I didn't really figure out what to do very well. I kind of let that slide and paid for that then in postpartum recovery. But with Zelda, I found the Sculpt Society, which is Megan Root, which is a New York based workout system that is so small. And this is a non-paid advertisement, by the way. I just straight up love her, and I don't not getting anything back for this plug, but I loved. She made a pregnancy and postpartum and pelvic floor recovery programs in her app. And I did the free trial of right when I got pregnant of her regular workouts because her whole thing is like small, 15 minutes or less. I mean, some of them are like 25 minutes, but it's not like hours and hours of working out. And they're all like, there's all kinds of different ones that you can do. Dance, usually it's dance related. Usually it's very low impact cardio and low, not any equipment necessary. You can just do it in your backyard or your house. And her prenatal workout program, I did literally from weeks 1 through 40. It was amazing and very, very doable, very manageable. And I have a toddler and I have a business and I
And you were
don't,
sick?
and I was sick.
It's
Yeah. And I
incredible.
really stuck with that one and I loved, and I feel great now. Like I already have no ab separation. I'm doing her postpartum now program, and I'm already like I got on a horse today and I was like, I feel fine. I feel good, which is
That's
great.
so good.
And I highly recommend that program because it's really doable. And I tell like any of my clients or my mom friends that ask me what to do outside of the saddle, it's that do that because it's a reasonable amount and it's not like Peloton or something where it's just like so much time and you have to do it so long and seems a little crazy. For me, I don't like super crazy high energies. I don't need to be jacked up to work out. I need like
Totally.
let's talk about breath work and talk about form. And sometimes some of the workouts were literally 7 minutes arms, 7 minutes of like crazy arm movements that make your arms feel really strong. And that was it. And then you do that for that day and you do a full body thing 20 minutes the next day or something. And she has calendars in the app that show you like in a week's time, you should do these two, then a rest day, and then these two, and then a rest day. So you're not even
I
like
love that.
pounding at it. And I loved it. I highly recommend. I'm gonna probably continue on the app. And the greatest thing is she filmed all of them while she was pregnant with her second baby. So everything is you're not just like listening to some cheerleader be like, "Come on, you can do it." It's like this. There's a pregnant woman actually doing it. So
Yeah. You're
it's
like, if
also a
she
little
can
bit
do
fun.
it, I can give it a try.
Exactly. I was like, this feels kind of real, you know. So I
Yeah.
love that, and that I definitely contribute to my success in coming back easier this time.
Yeah. That makes me really happy for you. And I have seen the ads on Instagram and I haven't downloaded it, but I'm sold now.
Yeah, she's
I
like
wish
one of
you
my
were
heroes.
affiliated so I could give you credit. Um, I know that your birth experiences with Alice and Zelda were vastly different.
Yes.
So talk to us and um, Zelda was much better.
Yes.
So talk to us about what you changed in those two birth experiences and any advice that you would give for someone, whether they're a first time mom or this is not their first time.
Yeah, for sure. This is my favorite thing to preach about on my soapbox because I felt I was so uneducated going into my first birth. I was a very typical horse person, horse trainer, where like babies were pretty foreign to me. I'm the oldest daughter, so I don't have siblings with children. No, none of my family lives nearby. And most of my friends are horse trainers who either didn't have time to have children or are much older, already had children and kind of forgot how it goes. So I felt I was very much in this limbo of like nobody could advise me that well. I also don't have a great relationship with my own mother, so I couldn't really talk to anyone about this. It's not a pity party, it's just the way it was for me. And I then learned through my birth with Alice what I didn't want, but I learned it the
Mhm.
hard way, sadly. So for me, like, I'm not an uber naturalist, I'm not like a crunchy hippie, but I do prefer to start that way with everything before I medicate, before I do um, anything invasive. I like to try the natural way first. I'm really want to be clear. I'm not like an anti-vaxxer or anti-medication. My horses get joint injections. My horses get all the support they need, probably more than I've ever had medically for sure.
Yeah.
I do
That's how it goes.
therapeutic shoeing. I work, I have high performance sport horses. So it's not about not medicating. But for me, in my first birth, I didn't know that all the medication would lead to the outcome that I had. So the, Reader's Digest version is was given Pitocin to speed along. I had a bad reaction to that. My then was given the epidural early. I was obviously given options, but with Pitocin, I was actually never given the option to not, and I was not educated on what happens when you get it. So I didn't know that it could cause extreme uh, contractions right away, close together, unbearable pain, which I think anybody that has had Pitocin can agree. And there's lots of hilarious reels about it and its side effects. But I didn't know that. So I got it and then was in unbearable pain and got the epidural way early. I was only like 3 centimeters dilated. And I didn't know that then I would spend the next 2 days restarting my IV, restarting my epidural in my back because they were like, you're still not progressing and you're still not, and you're like, you don't want to go to a C-section. I kept saying, please don't do a C-section unless you have to, because I'm a rider. I want to get back in the saddle faster. And I've heard that's the worst way to go. So, I didn't have a lot of education going into it and ended up with a super long labor. then I was pretty much tapped out by like 40 hours of labor and couldn't really push, didn't really know where I was in this fog of
Oh my
medication and
God.
throwing up. And I had passed out a couple of times and I just felt like death. And I really
Hmm.
just wanted it to be over. And I didn't push well enough. And they ended up using a vacuum on Alice to pull her out. I'm small and she was big. I had an episiotomy and third-degree tearing, which is pretty awful. And all can be related to what I had and the order that I had it. And I didn't know that had I labored more at home or maybe not gone in so early or maybe fought a little bit harder to not get pitocin and just wait my body out on the contractions, not be pushed to get the things that caused me to get the epidural, and then perhaps it'd be different, maybe not, right? I mean, hindsight's 2020. But then coming into my second pregnancy and preparing for labor, I was determined to try and have a different experience. And for me, the first birth then with Alice was extremely traumatic because I felt like I got all this medication that put me in this like haze. I mean, I was in a fog. Like I felt like it was like a 1960s birth where I was like, what's happening? I had this baby.
Totally.
I didn't even, and yes, she got out safely and she was healthy and that's their ultimate goal. But then afterwards, nobody told me that tearing your entire bottom downstairs, stitching you from one end to the other is fucking horrible. And the recovery will be horrible and you
Hmm.
will feel like you're dying. And so I was kind of shocked and spiraled from that. And so coming into my second labor, I was like, I just want to like try to do that differently. So I worked with, I didn't go to the same OB practice, and I'm not blaming her, but I really didn't. The follow up and the aftercare was what probably many of us have experienced, which is little to none. At 6 weeks, they're like, you're good to go. You can go back to doing everything. What kind of birth control do you want? And I was like, wait,
Right.
what? I feel like I'm dead. And also, I don't think that's normal down there right now. They're
Right.
like, looks good. Go ahead, back to work, whatever you want to do. I'm like, no, I mean, I don't. And I'm also not good in the head. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, this is a direct quote from my, at the time, doctor. I told her, she said, how are you doing mentally? I said, I don't think good. Like, I don't feel good. And she goes, well, you'll tell us if it gets worse. And shooed me on my way. And I was like, is worse like death? Because that's kind
Yeah.
of where I'm at. But anyway, that I was like, we're not doing this again. So I then, from referrals from friends, chose to go to the Connecticut midwives practice, which is right near my
Hmm.
house. It's the Connecticut, I forget, birth center, Women's Health and Birth Center, or something like this. It's one of the only freestanding birth centers in the area, and it's very highly regarded, and the midwife group there is lovely. The women are super empowering and kind, and they do all the care, prenatal care, and also all your OBGYN needs. I went there after, in between my two babies, I had a miscarriage and I needed sort of to check in after that, and I wanted to leave my OB practice that I had
Hmm.
not had good experiences with, and went to them and had a really, really nice experience. And then they were like, yeah, if you get pregnant again and need prenatal care, we do that. We do the birth center. You can have your baby here, et cetera, et cetera. And so I chose to do that and worked with a really great group of, all the midwives were excellent, but there were a couple that I got very close to, and then planned to try to work my birth around their schedules as much as I could possibly, and in the way that I was like, I'm just gonna call you and then it has to be you when it
Yeah,
comes in.
totally.
But they were very, they all live locally and are very like just kind and wanting you to have whatever experience you want to have.
Hmm.
And because I had such bad tearing the first time, they advised me to think about going to the hospital so that if I did have it again, I could be stitched up by an OB there or by an attending, because they are. And one thing I really appreciated about them was that they were very upfront and saying, like, if you have third-degree tearing, we don't do that. We don't stitch
Yep.
that. That's out of our realm. And of course, you want the very best people doing that.
Yeah.
You don't want people learning how to do that on you. So
Yeah. Can
I
you
was
imagine like, oops,
exactly.
like
It's
not
like,
what I'm trying to
no,
hear right now.
there were some dark holes that I went down in on the internet about recovery from this slash when it goes wrong, like things that can happen, that your body like starts putting the wrong things in the wrong places. And it's like, no, thank you. I don't want that at all. I don't want to even remotely risk that.
Yeah.
But I did want to really try to do unmedicated because I wanted to, on two reasons. One, I wanted to try very hard to control my own delivery. I wanted to know when I really had to go to the hospital because I also hate hospitals. So I didn't want to go and be there and be, in the epidural for days and days. And people had told me, well, your second one will likely be faster. That was very true for me. This one came super quick. But I also just really wanted to like not feel it in the way, like I was terrified of the pain and not
Yeah.
sure that I could handle it. And I till the very end, to the very wire, I didn't know if I would have the epidural or not. So I was not ever committed one way or the other because I was kind of like, I don't know. If I can't take it, then I can't take it,
Right.
but I want to try. And fortunately, the midwife that ended up delivering Zelda, I knew her very well by that point, and she was very much like, you can do it, but you don't have to do it. She was very like, whatever way works for you, whatever point, we can do this. She also coached me all the way through my breathing and getting me to do it because I did end up doing it unmedicated entirely,
With a 9-pound baby, you guys.
which was crazy.
Literally bow down to this woman. It is so incredible.
Danbury Hospital is a teaching hospital, and so they tell you at the beginning, is it okay if some residents come in and are learning? And I was like, fine, yeah, of course. I'm I'm a
Yeah.
horse trainer. Like, you want to share, if you want to watch this shit, go ahead. And
Yeah.
so they were like, there were a bunch of women in the room, and after, one of the women was literally crying, and she was like, you are my hero. I've never seen someone push out a baby like that. And I was like, well, you're a baby doctor, so I'm not going to take that as a huge, huge compliment, but I will.
Totally.
I'll take it
Yeah.
because it was for me like so 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 empowering. Oh no. It's okay. You can sit here and
What
sleep.
a vastly different just way to
Oh
experience something
man.
that,
It
the
was
same
polar.
the same thing. You
Yes.
birthed 2 daughters, and they were just such different experiences, and I'm so happy for you. I
It was
have
polar
I had
opposites and I was
similar
so glad.
experiences. What was that?
They were polar opposites, and I was
Yeah.
so glad for the second
Yeah.
one because I felt like it rewrote my bad experience with Alice, and I felt like, okay, good. I also never need to do it again. The pushing out a
Yeah.
9-pound baby unmedicated, so it's
I
like,
bet.
check,
You
done,
did it.
been there, done that.
Um, that's really cool. I had similar experiences with my doctors. I switched doctors halfway and still was like, I don't know, like nobody really knows me. I'm not getting a lot of guidance. I had a doula, thankfully, who
Oh,
like
nice. Yeah.
really guided me and made it a positive experience. But she and I talked after, and she's like, next time around, look for a group with midwives
Yeah.
because that sounds like kind of what you're looking for. So I'm happy to hear that that was one of the big things that changed your experience.
Totally. I would do it again. Like, I genuinely don't intend to have any more children, but
Yeah,
if I were, I wish I could go back and do Alice with them because it
right.
was just like so great. It was so much
Yeah.
better. And I didn't know it existed. So now
Mhm.
I'm like broadcasting. Like, if you, and I think probably many of us horsewomen would be in the same kind of vein because it's kind of the way we live our lives. It's a lot of being in this world is going to make a lot of people have these similar feelings, and I bet you that everyone in their first just doesn't know what versions can exist. I can't be the only one that didn't know that. And so now I'm like, if you can, just to educate yourself on all the options before you make a choice and be okay with changing, and then I think that can really lead to better experiences overall for people's first birth.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's so nice. I mean, this is an example of like having a conversation like this or all the conversations you've done for Equestrian Mama out there that gives you, I mean, something other than Google to go to and start navigating this not on your own.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
I think the more community we can build, the better.
for this, I can't believe we're coming up on the hour. I could talk to you forever. So
I know. I was like, whoa, that's fast.
I want to give you the choice of what we end on. We could either talk about mental health postpartum or how to get back in the saddle with a child or children
Mm.
around. Like, that is one of the things I see in a lot of these communities, people asking. It's like every other question is like, "How do I get to the barn with my little?"
Well, I'll sew them together just a little bit because for
Okay.
me they're hand in hand. My postpartum with Alice was not good, and you can find it in the full episode. I think is a postpartum episode dedicated to this on the podcast. But I getting back in the saddle was pivotal in getting my mental health back on track. And so having that those pieces in place to do that as soon as possible is generally what I recommend to certainly most professionals like myself, or people that, like, there is no shame in this, but really need to ride to feel good and happy and complete. That I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think most people are afraid to say that because it sounds selfish, or it sounds like, well, you should be with your children or want to be with your children 1000% of the time. No, you can want to be on like for me today, I got back on a horse 5 weeks out, and my children were both there at the barn, perfectly happy to not have me holding them for 5 seconds. And I'm like, I feel complete. This is necessary for me. And now I know that about myself from my first pregnancy. So I made that a bigger priority this time. With Alice, I certainly had more physical and mental complications that slowed getting back in. So I think getting back in the saddle, however that looks for you and however you can do it, is probably the best medicine that
Mhm.
you can do. And for me, that means having the right support system. I don't have family in the area. We don't have grandparents that can just take our children. So I have a very, very curated and well appreciated and loved staff in my barn that also help watch my children. Now I have a babysitter that grew into a groom and barn manager for me. She does everything. She's amazing, but she's especially good with my girls, and she will watch Alice, and my clients will watch Alice, and my clients love Alice. She's literally been raised in the barn. So they all do their turns with playing with her with puzzles, or she sits in the corner with her toys and watches the horses go around. I mean, it's what works for us, and I think that's super super unique. Also, just like pregnancy and riding, but any support or way that you can get your riding back in your priorities, it's important to do. And I think probably more important than the system, because the system's going to look very different for each person, right? Like how many horses you have to ride and how much you have to have your children with you. Do they go to daycare? Do you have a spouse that can help? Whatever. So that's all going to be super individual, but I can also help more with that in other areas in the future. But for this conversation, I think the biggest piece to leave with people is that it matters. What you care about matters, because what the mom needs is what the child needs. That's just what I have learned and what I feel so, so strongly about, because a happy, healthy mom, and if that means riding, that's what you do. That's what you prioritize. That's the mom that's going to take the best care of their kids. And that's all your children need. They don't need the best baby bouncer and the best formula and the best diapers and the natural whatever. They need a happy, healthy mom. And if for most of us horse people, certainly anyone probably listening to this or listen to the podcast, horses are a very important part of your life, and that is more than okay. That should just be the priority, and that's what I'm here to kind of keep screaming from the rooftops.
That is the most beautiful message to end on, and I love that we can reframe it and show people that your love for horses is an asset to you being a mother, because your children are so lucky that you have this thing in your life that fulfills you and brings you mental health and happiness, so you can bring that to your relationship with them and demonstrate what that looks like to
Yes,
find that thing for yourself.
yes.
Um, I adore you, and I'm so inspired by you. I've said it a lot of
Thank
times
you.
already,
Thank
but I
you.
really am,
Feeling is
and
mutual.
just so grateful that you're bringing your whole self to this platform and to everyone listening. So Thank you for doing what you're doing. I
Of
will
course.
continue learning from you and being part of your community. And thank you for making time for us, even with sweet Zelda and
Of
Alice and
course.
everything you have going on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for supporting all of these messages. Thank you for making the podcast possible. It's like mutual affection. I also adore you. So thank you for having me on. And
Of
thanks for letting
course.
Zelda be squeaking in the background. She's
Yes, that was nothing but an addition. Hi, Zelda. Anyone who's just listening, you should go to YouTube and watch too, because Zelda's made a couple appearances and she's too cute.
Aw, thank you.
Um,
Thanks for having me. I'm glad this worked out. It worked out perfectly.
Me too. Yes. Well, have a wonderful night and we will talk to you soon. And I'll definitely be listening to you soon on Equestrian Mama.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Bye, Lucy.
Bye.
I don't know if we're still live. So I'm just going to leave because Kinsey told us
Okay.
it might be a while, but
Bye.
I appreciate you so much, Lucy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love doing this. I'll do it every day.
You're so good at it.
Oh,
And I
thank
think
you.
that to me, that was perfect in like touching on topics and giving them the attention they kind of deserve while also giving people kind of like opening the door to
Yeah,
everything else
I
you
think
have
it was
out there.
awesome. And this is like exactly what I want to do. It's exactly like the
Good.
kind of like diversity of content to put out here to be like, well, I'll keep talking about this on any platform that I
Yeah,
can, you
totally.
know.
Um, if you the electrolytes thing, I have a few friends who have like food businesses and
Oh yeah.
um if you